This is an open letter to Uncle Sam. You know I love you, Uncle. And it's because of that love I am, going to tell you a few things that it seems many of your tribal men, the tribal men of Uncle Sam, have forgotten the history, have maybe never read the history. That, folks, the history tells us. I want to tell you, Uncle Sam, about the British and the French. It's been about a century now, Uncle Sam, that you have got into bed with the British and the French. Same bed. Yeah, we know you're genetically, you, Uncle Sam, and your majority of your people so far are genetically related to the people across the pond, mostly the British and the French. These were the most populated and the closest European lands to across the Atlantic to the United States. So they were the most populated and the most coastal countries. So they sent the most immigrants to the newfound, the Redskin land that is now Newfoundland. So there is this genetic, relationship that you, Uncle Sam, or your managers have a very close relationship with the Europeans. And that's great, I guess. But the thing is, the rest of the world feels left out of this cozy relationship that you guys have, my dear Uncle Sam. The rest of the world is a little, they feel they haven't, how should I put this? They're getting a shitty end of the stick for a long time, because they're getting less, they're not getting anywhere, they're struggling. I mean, Ethiopia has been struggling to be Ethiopia for the past 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, since the British, since the Europeans moved over and disturbed the local order and took the order themselves, pink skin structure, colonized them, organized them in their view for what is best, and that is production, labor. Okay, what goods do you have here in Africa that I can make money out of? Because I got the free labor, because these motherfuckers are, we can treat them as whatever. They're nice people, they don't stand up for themselves, they're nice people. So let's see if we can put these nice people to work so they can, so we can get rich. So now these rich countries that all, got rich through colonialism have invited Uncle Sam to their bed. I'm sorry, Uncle Sam, but Europeans in general, but specifically the British in particular, are not good examples to follow, are not good friends to have. Uncle Sam, let me remind you, you had to have the Revolutionary War to break away from the British colonialism. Now you're in bed with the British. What does that tell you? They didn't get out of bed. British has always felt superior and elite to everybody else on this planet. The British feel so superior and elite that they break away from the European Union. It's like getting up from the boardroom and saying, nope, I take my business elsewhere. Good friend, have a nice day. I got friends. I got friends. I can depend on my ex-colonies. The British breaking away from European Union, having an island separated by a small distance from a mainland, but politically aligned with somebody else somewhere else, a distant power, is a gamble. You see, Cuba has not been an ally of Uncle Sam for some time, and they have suffered for it because they are an island next to the big piece of land. So the whole comfortable, easy trade that could have happened between this island and the mainland next to it was disrupted by these locals who thought, they can, they have rights. They have rights. Whoever, So Uncle Sam, I love you, man, but your constitution it doesn't say anything about, and our interests. You see what I'm saying? It didn't define any interest across the planet to justify enforcing the law on every corner of the planet. Could it be done? Yes, of course it could be done. Should it be done? Let's put it this way, Uncle Sam. If you are a benevolent overlord, that is the overlord who, respects rights of everybody, to exist. I understand they are for example, the Venezuelans. You can't stick Islamism to the Venezuelans. You can't stick, fundamentalism to Venezuelans. The leader was a cocksucking general, Mr. Chavez. But he was a nationalist. You have to give him that. A nationalist is somebody who says, every member of my tribe is important to me, so I want to raise everybody's living standards. Cuba, Colombia, there is a revolution going on because they have also been, kept under state of siege because of, I guess, drug cartels, and for years they have been, suppressed too. They just didn't. Now nobody talks about it. The news organizations all, don't say anything about what's going on in Colombia because Colombia is an ally. So you need to, give the guy some room to whoever the fuck is in charge to suppress the situation before the news we don't want the news to carry. We don't want news to be carried of things that we don't really, want people to know. That means our shitty ass. You see, what don't I want others to know? What don't I want others to know? Is that they have a shitty ass. You see what I'm saying? If I know somebody, the shitty ass part is the downfall of the situation. But the point is this: but if we admit that we also everybody has a shitty ass, then we can sit down and negotiate and say, okay, how much interest do you want, and how much interest do I want, and can we negotiate? If this is the understanding, that we have to sit down and negotiate something before people get killed, before half the country is uprooted, become refugees, and into other parts of the world. Uncle Sam, my pink-skinned friends, you scream about refugees and why so many refugees are moving into pink-skin land. You want to know why? Because pink-skin soldiers are in brown-skin land. You're not creating stability over there. What it is any foreign intervention here is the thing. In a closed environment, imagine a closed system. In a closed system like a prison, somebody has the big penis, somebody has the penis a little shorter than him, under him, and has a couple of people with shorter penises still under them. It's a structure. When it's a closed system, a structure forms who has the biggest penis and who's the soldier. Okay. When this structure is formed, things become stable. People don't get killed. In a closed loop system, if you leave the systems with their natural order, less people get killed, less historical artifacts get lost, less Buddhas get blown up. I mean, there was a video of Margaret Thatcher actually I think I talked about this once before in another video, but there's a video of Margaret Thatcher actually under a tent with some smelly, Afghanis, telling them, yes, we are here for you, go fight for your rights. The fucking USSR was trying to bring some kind of order to the shithole, and the British, all they could do is try to prevent that order from forming. Folks, order is beneficial to everybody. Whether it has Russian influence, of course, it's a neighbor to Russia. It must have Russian influence, just like the British have influence over Ireland. British have influence over Ireland, just like Ireland has influence over the British. When you're neighbors, you do have influence, and the size of your neighbor determines the size of his influence. And if we recognize this, and then we recognize that, China has an overbearing size in that area, so its policies should be aligned with Taiwan, or both ways. Chinese policy should be aligned with the Taiwanese policy, and Taiwanese policy should be aligned with the Chinese policy. That's as simple as it gets. And if you're 100 miles away from a major piece of land, I'm talking geography at this point. I'm talking geography. If you're 100 miles away from a big mass of land and you're a small tiny island, it makes normal sense to be aligned with the, whatever this big piece of land decides to do, this island should be aligned with, period. Or else you're going to have wars. It's as simple as that. By Brexit was the start of World War III. I'm sorry, the bunch of fools who do not understand geography apparently don't care less about people, care less more about their social status in the world. We are independent, an island of 90 million off a mainland of 500 million, and you're independent? Independent of what? Fish? Independent of, tomatoes? You gotta fly tomatoes in from the closest land, would be across the Atlantic, would be Uncle Sam's Florida. Basically, British have decided that no, we're not gonna import tomatoes from Spain, which is like 150 miles away, but 200 miles away, but we're going to import tomatoes from 2,000 miles away because that's somehow more, earth-friendly, environmentalist. Any idea of the cost difference? Are you mad? But it's sort of like a few, individuals with very, well-known bloodlines wanted to, keep their bloodlines from mixing with the Poles and the Hungarians downtown, in the Abbey. We don't want Poles here, we don't want Hungarians here, we don't want this intermixing. What the fuck? So again, this is superiority of the British, the feeling of the superiority of the British over the rest of us. Uncle Sam, this is your bed buddy. This British, with this kind of attitude that we do it alone, we are the empire, we have enough colonies, we have enough friends to depend on. I'm sorry, Uncle Sam, you broke away from the British a long time ago to be benevolent. You broke away from the British a long time ago to be benevolent. The whole idea of, benevolence. If you can help, help. If you can't help, don't help. But the whole idea of, ever since you got into bed with the motherland, the same people you have genetic relations with, as soon as you got into bed with them, Uncle Sam, you got into bed with colonialism. That is, me, a pink skin, would determine how things are going over there and give it a grade. Well, according to your grade system, if it was sort of like human rights and democracy and all this certain kind of economy or democracy, nothing was, the Arabian Peninsula was forgiven for all, never touched by the news. That why the fuck these guys don't need democracy? Have you ever heard anybody in any of the news channels say, why doesn't Saudi Arabia have democracy? Have you ever heard, ever, in any kind of news media that consistently says this? And, is put up by the news media that, yes, this is it. Yes, we're okay with his view. And he consistently says this. So, if you find somebody, you can't. Because nobody ever says that, no, folks, this is not it. Never, ever. It's sort of like, we don't recognize that Arabs need democracy. We tried it with the Egyptians, wasn't turning out in our interest. Well, let's put it this way. If basically whatever my neighbor does in terms of existing is not in your interest, whatever your neighbor does in terms of existing, it may not be in your interest. Your neighbor might want to develop, that may not be in your interest. So you may want to try to stop their develop. But the point is this: my interest should not determine the fate of my neighbor. To that extent, that if my neighbor's development is not to my interest, I'm just going to try to do something to prevent that development. That would be mad. That is mad. You see what I'm saying? So the whole point of what do you call it? The whole point of developing it. Development of others may not be in your interest. So what to do? You can't just give a blank check and say, no, whatever it costs to prevent that from developing, we will write the check for. Even, it means, however number of individuals have to, evaporate. How many number of individuals who have to evaporate? To do what? To bring more stability? The guy who brought the stability, that Iranian general, the guy who was instrumental, even by the admission of friends and foes, that he was instrumental in providing some kind of leadership in order to bring order, and sort of basically draw the line there and say, okay, stop fucking shooting at each other. And line is here. You have that. You have this. It became order. And Uncle Sam just shot the guy, as in evaporated the guy. And you're like, this guy just, there was a shithole. A place was turning into a shithole, and he helped stop it. And that's who Uncle Sam considers an enemy. Uncle Sam, don't know what to tell you, man. Love you, but you would think that the founding fathers of Uncle Sam's checklist didn't have this kind of interest in mind. They didn't have this kind of we got the big penis here and we can enforce our interest everywhere. And okay, you can, but you're disturbing the local order there. Back to the order of who has the biggest penis, shorter until the soldiers. That order that has formed in different corners, different nodes of humanity on the map of Earth, this kind of structure that has formed, every time Uncle Sam, bull in the china shop, breaks a couple of them, and the whole population has to, just because, disagreement with a system, an order that the ruler had formed. An order that the ruler had formed in a fucking corner of this planet. Different nodes of people in concentration in different areas of geography. If somebody has formed some kind of order, you have to work with it. You want it to grow, you want it to open up, you want to dance, you want it to dance, you have to help it. Not hit it. You want it to break dance? Help it. Not beat it. You're breaking its leg. It's not going to help the Afghans doing break dance. You know what helps the Afghans? If you send them some tourists. If you close down the fucking cruise line business, send Afghanistan some tourists. Actually, you can pay people, your people, to go to Afghanistan as tourists. Money is being pumped into the local economy in terms of, Uncle Sam's currency, and they will become more and more like you every day until, a light of Uncle Sam, is shed on some dark places. But shed that light through tourists. Uncle Sam, you can shed that light through tourism. If you want to shed the light of individuality and individual rights to the dark corners of this planet, you can do it with tourists. And it actually bring back the draft people for tourism. Pay a soldier's paycheck to every one of your citizens to go spend 2 years outside of U.S. territory. That will bring such a better perspective of the world to Uncle Sam, and better perspective of the world from Uncle Sam's children. If you do tourism, Uncle Sam, citizen tourist, 2 years, draft, Mormon style. You can hire the Mormons to carry it out for you, but without the religion part. Advisors. You have a couple of Mormon advisors to tell you how it works. Start sending American as tourists abroad. You're paying them to be tourists for 2 years. But tourists carry, beach umbrellas. Tourists. Here, go there. You want to go with this money, you want to go to their university and study, go to their university and study. My fellow American. If you want to, have fun for 2 years, go have fun for 2 years. Go backpack. But outside of your homeland for 2 years. That would be the duty. I would assure you, you will not have another war on your planet if actually every one of you does this on this planet. Every country should, basically say you gotta, everybody, age 18 to 20, 2 years abroad. As a soldier, just enough money to live as a student. Not a lot of money. It's just that, it's basically like couple of hundred a week, as long as things work out. For 2 years, if the young are sent, you will get much better result. If the objective is to spread individual freedom around the world, the idea of individual freedom, who better to spread the idea of individual freedom around the world than an American? Why do it through force, which will never, use of force never really works out for neither side. There is a lot of expense on one side, on the supposed winner, and there is a lot of casualties on the lost side, the supposed loser. But everybody loses when you lose variety on your planet. When you lose variety on your planet, you're losing something. When you're losing variety on your planet, you're losing something. The variety is the taste of life. With no variety, life becomes impossible. That's why jail is a very impossible problem. But folks, Uncle Sam, I think following the British lead, the French lead, hasn't really worked out for many people. Around the world, dealing with the British and the French has never worked out. In France now, for many centuries, these guys have gone, the French, the Spanish, the British, have gone overseas and enforced their will upon the locals, and have taken some wealth back home, what can be considered as wealth back home, and for a century or more, many more centuries, the wealth that has been transferred from ownership rights, that the wealth transfers by ownership rights. If ownership rights are transferred from whatever pyramid of force that was necessary for that area of the world, wherever somebody from outside went in and cut that pyramid of structure of society, social structure, the outsiders broke that pyramid and put down their own little pyramid of in case of Europeans, the French and the British, their pink skin form of order. That's what colonialism is. And the purpose of that order was to benefit from the order, and that is, use the locals to draw wealth from the local resources. many times it wasn't, it wasn't, it was just, even if you have, free labor to grow stuff, you still, if you can keep the labor from living above a certain level, if you can keep the labor, force the labor to live on less than they make, then you can collect whatever the wealth you got from whatever they made, more of it for yourself. That's what slavery is. Making, not paying for the work. So a bunch of people have to live way less than what they have made on a daily basis. So every day that a slave works is like the slave is getting maybe 10% of his labor as food and clothes and whatever, and 90% goes to the boss, which probably boss has another 10% in expenses, so boss gets to keep 80%. It is what it is. So the best way to deal with this, Uncle Sam, is don't become friends with the British and the French. They have brought this colonialism back home with them. They opened the door. They opened the door. Now their citizenry is so intertwined that, when they went back home after colonialism supposedly ended, when they went back home, there were so many, attachments that they had to, house, because their life was, because they cooperated with the colonialists, so their life was in danger, so they had to flee, and the colonialists couldn't turn their back on them. Imagine the pulling out of Saigon, and the last chopper. The point is this: if you leave them alone, Uncle Sam, every shithole eventually forms some kind of structure. Some kind of pyramid is formed. It's going to be, if it has been a shithole for a long time, it will be a primitive pyramid, but still somebody is going to have the bigger penis. And they're left alone, and if you leave them alone, they develop on their own. If you see anything bad from them, well, you have defenses. But the offense part is the part that becomes colonialism, Uncle Sam. If the British and the French, whatever however they try to sweet talk you, Uncle Sam, the British and the French, however they try to sweet talk you into doing colonial work with them, along with them, or I'm not sure now who's more for colonialism, the Europeans or the Uncle Sam people, but they're all basically in the same boat. They're all basically in the same boat. It's all being done under the banner of we are going in to bring order. How many outside ventures have been successful in bringing order recently, or previously? How many outside ventures have been successful outside of your and recognize borders? Outside of these borders, I mean, what there could be interest of anyone outside one's own borders, and then why not get into a loving match of sending enough of your people there to have less misunderstanding, and have less border issues, being more friendly. It's and this goes back to I'm not sure why not invite the Arabs back in, the Arab locals back in, and let's build Israel, build it as best it can be built, humanly possible. But let's involve everybody. Say if basically say, hey, I don't care who you are. You're Chinese, you're Arab, you're South African, you're Brazilian. If you want to buy a piece of land here and develop it, here you can buy this piece of land at this price, but you have to develop it within a year or you lose it. Wouldn't be bad. It's you're building the country, okay, even better. Put the United Nations there too, in such circumstance. Put the United Nations right, between, right in the middle of Jerusalem. Put United Nations there. All good. But here's the thing, as long as it's really United Nations, that basically you say, anybody wants land, come on in. You can buy a piece, but you have to develop it within a year to our approval. And come up with a master plan and leave the rest of it to the engineers of your society. And you have, within a few years you have, everything. But the point is this can be done if you just say, come on in. Anybody who's willing to pay this price for this area, you can buy it, but you have to develop it real quick, or else we take it back. Rights to anybody. Make the Holy Land like the old, redskin land, or the new pinkskin land. Make it like whoever is, wants to work hard, come on, work hard. And we love Uncle Sam for it. And there is nothing better. But here's the thing, Uncle Sam, my point in this whole conversation is that it's better to be if the idea, empire's good. Empires bring order. I am from a heart of an empire. Used to be. Now, still, they understand order. The fucking Iranians understand order. They understand because they have been orderly for 50 years? Yes, there have been some. You basically use as much force as if the locals all behave intelligently, like the Swedish or the Norwegians, you give them a lot of freedom. And eventually they will. If you educate your people, which the Iranians have done a good job of, if you educate your people, you can deal with them. You can give them more rights if they're educated, in order to not to murder each other over pussy, for example. But the whole idea is that when they understand it, you give them more freedom. But this idea that, no, we don't like him, we don't do this, we vaporize their top leaders. You think that social structure that has formed, that is barely holding together, you want to destroy that social structure. Instead of sending tourists in to try to mellow the structure and to try to make that structure more like you through tourists, you're putting the structure under embargo, trying to break it. Uncle Sam, it just doesn't bring stability and security. And you're wondering that about why Hondurans and Guatemalans and Mexicans, mostly those Central Americans, and a lot of South Americans are headed your way, is because every time they had a nationalist government like Venezuela is having now, they have always been under embargo. Sort of like, no, you cannot have a nationalist leader over there who is, looking after, thinking that you're independent. Fuck you, you're not independent. Sit down. That's what it sounds to us, what Uncle Sam is telling the Venezuelans. Sit the fuck down. You don't have no independence. Because you're in this hemisphere and you're not Brazil. Maybe one day we'll respect the Brazilians, but not you. Well, the Venezuelans have got this Simon Bolivar fellow that I guess, or maybe I'm getting the wrong guy, but they have this historical figure with the biggest penis they had found in their land, and they feel they have the oldest civilization in South America. This is what the Venezuelans think. In South America, they believe they have the oldest, the most nationalist. So, and they're a problem, and everybody says they're a problem because the news, everybody says there is a problem there. These guys are problematic because what? They're nationalists, they're socialists. Basically, they're saying that I want to feed my people. What is nationalist socialist? A nationalist socialist is somebody who says, all my people, all the people who are born in this area, all the people who I am responsible for are my responsibilities. I can't say, not all of you some of you are bastards, are not my responsibility. And Uncle Sam, dude, what is your responsibility is your responsibility. It shows it's within your United Nations determined geographical borders. That's your responsibility. What takes place outside of these borders are not your responsibility. Unfortunately, if you can help with tourists, sending tourists around the world, do it. That's your exporting individual rights, the idea of individual rights and individual freedom. That's a good thing. If you can help the world with your tourists, Uncle Sam, please do it. But do not get into the bed with the French and the British, because these guys are not benevolent. The French and the British are not benevolent. I'm sending the French in there, but a military ruler in France would be much more friendly with the British than the Germans, because they have bad memories of the Germans. So that military coup that the French were talking about, bad idea. That's probably a British idea. Folks, nobody should follow the British. Nobody should follow the British. The British bad. The British always colonialist. The colonialist ideas. So Uncle Sam, if you get into the British, which you have been in bed with the British for the past 100 years, 1776. Since 1776, a few decades after 1776, you got back into bed with the British, and then recently in 19th century and 20th century, you really got into bed with the British and the French. But remember, British specifically are always bad news. The British are, because they're colonialists. Why they're colonialists? Because they're an island nation. Island nations, because they're always dependent from resources from overseas. Island nations are always by nature colonialist, because it was much cheaper if they could go and buy you know, force your way and make a port for yourself over there would be cheaper, not to have to pay the locals on the French side to carry your goods to the ships. If you can get that part under your control as well, even better. So by nature, the islanders are always thinking, I got to get me a piece of the mainland. A piece of the Spanish, a piece of the French, a piece of the Irish, Northern Ireland, a piece of Irish. It's sort of like, I got to get a piece of another land because it's an island. You can't increase its fucking size. So the British are cursed for eternity, like the Japanese are cursed for eternity to be, or like the Taiwanese are cursed for eternity to be colonialists, with colonialist mindset, because the idea is it makes more economical sense in your capitalist system. It makes more economical sense for the islanders to own that side of the border as well. So they own the shipping port on this side. If they can really own the shipping port on that side, they don't have to spend the money. They make more money. So that's the whole idea, is colonialist. These island nations are by nature had to be colonialists to make more money. So getting into bed with them, Uncle Sam, it's a bad idea. It has been a bad idea. Starting from Vietnam, I guess, maybe there were earlier ones, but starting from the main one, the Vietnam, that was a local against colonialist war that the French literally handed to Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam said, yes, I got a bigger penis, I'm gonna put down the locals. And it didn't work out because they're locals, Uncle Sam, they're locals. These wars, Afghanistan was a work of, British people. They put these countries together. The piece that the British took off Iran was Afghanistan, and it's a landlocked. You have come up with a map, and in this shitty map that you have produced a landlocked country, which is on top of the mountains. There is never going to be a really power structure over there to control the whole thing from the central location. The Russians did their best, but all the British could do was try to prevent them from doing by giving your Uncle Sam a blowjob. I guess the British did, and even Uncle Sam started helping. Helping who? Helping one group of shitheads to win against another group of shitheads, and the main tribe that has been able to form an order, the main one is the Russians. They're trying to bring some kind of order. Who cares whether Afghanistan has independence or not? Afghanistan is always going to be independent. It's never going to be independent because Afghanistan does not have access to warm waters. So it's always walking on eggshells with his neighbors. And the neighbors are going to, squeeze as much as they can out of Afghanistan. Because, not squeeze, but, taxes, you're using, our roads. You're using our railway. Taxes or whatever. But the point is this. The landlocked country is a bad idea. Whose idea? The British idea. Kashmir, another British idea. Israel, another British idea. British fruition. What's the fruition? It's the idea that the British basically decided that a religious, one specific religion ruling over this area is a good idea. An area that's a lot of these towel heads believe it's important. Yeah, give it to an intern. Be an intern. Become very, humanist. Have a humanist government over there to try to, cure all. Build the biggest cities and make the whole thing one giant big city of the future. But do it with giving equal rights to everybody. That's the only way that can, and it's going to be great if that happens. If you give equal rights to everybody and everybody has the right to buy the land and develop it within a short order or lose it, you're going to get great results. And the point is, even you're going to enjoy the diversity. Even you, my Jewish friend in Israel, you're going to enjoy the diversity, because life is only enjoyable when there is diversity. If it becomes between vegetative state and death, that's exactly where we draw the line and say vegetative state, no, maybe death is better, because you cannot experience, you experience much less and less and less. So experience less, and that means the variety is lost. When the variety is lost, is life even precious at that point? No, the more variety is lost, the less precious life becomes. The more variety you lose, the less precious life becomes, because becomes less and less point of going through the routine. Less and less point of going through the routine, you lose the interest to life. Then it comes like, what's the point? I mean, Stephen Hawking, if he wasn't a big brain, that his work was done with his brain and absorbing information and analyzing information, life was meaningless to him, because as far as physical and maybe emotional needs were not met by his body. So if imagine such a person would not even have the cognitive ability to entertain himself with, as far as variety, then that would say, okay, it's a vegetative state. Why go through the routine? What's the purpose? What's the point? So the whole idea of we're going to protect this land by not allowing anybody else in it, the idea of my land, only my land, is when you say the idea of my land only belongs to the people who follow my perspective, way of thinking, my ideology. Only people who believe in my ideology are allowed to live here. Only people only people who believe in my ideology. Because there are ideologies, all these religions are a bunch of ideologies that there is, thank God there's no proof of any of it beside the Shal of Turin. Besides that, there is no evidence of any of these. This just has been handed down through the history, a certain constitutions about how to live, a certain perspective in life of how to live. All these ideologies I mean, they are not one more valuable than the other, one more important than the other, one more right than the other. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. I'm sorry to say. I mean, there is no Yahweh, there is no way, there is no more or less a different, different concentrations of people in different parts of earth came up with their own ideas of what shall we do to live a better life. What shall we do to live a better life? So if we sit back and say, no, what you guys think we have to do to, live more peacefully in the fucking societies that we have formed, your way of thinking is bad and my way of thinking is good, and I will show it to you because I got a bigger gun. Uncle Sam, love you, man, but whoever is, is at the wheel is in bed with the British, and Mr. Epstein was pimping for both sides. Had the British on his right, eating from his right hand, and had Mr. Clinton eating from his left hand, and Mr. Trump eating from his left hand. Mr. Epstein. So, I mean, you even use the same pimp. I guess what I'm trying to say, Uncle Sam, if you're using the same pimp as the British, the same pimps as the British, that means you're very close to the British, Uncle Sam. British are always going to be colonialists, as I explained, because of their geography. Are always going to think colonialism because it's always cheaper for them to own from the piece of the mainlands. It was more profits, and having a little free cheap labor over there, more profits. Being in bed with the British is the worst thing. I think George Washington would think. The George Washington who fought the British, who were colonialists and still are colonialists, getting into bed with the British, even if they send you Thatcher and gives you a blowjob from time to time, even that is not worth it, Uncle Sam. British are not your friend, Uncle Sam. And this is for people who are outside of United States. You got this, probably you don't know that NPR, National Public Radio in United States, which I listen to and I love, there is no national news. They rebroadcast whatever the British news is, whatever the British have decided on. The National Public Radio in the United States, the news that it gives is a rebroadcast of the British international news. That doesn't give the British local news, but the British international news, BBC, is rebroadcasted by NPR. You know what your perspective will be on the world when you listen to the news from your wife. You're going to get exactly the same point of view that your wife has towards the world, if you only get your news from your wife. By news I mean the chatter from around the town and around the family, around the extended family, or around the neighborhood, or that chatter. That is, if you only hear your wife's, whatever she brings, that news of the local news that she brings from the school and from the places that your wife is probably more in touch with, you will only hear what she has to say. So your perspective, her perspective, will become your perspective, at least to your closer environment. Listening to the British, or what the news, international news is to give the British the right to determine the perspective of America with regards to international news. You have a ex-colonial power, ex-colonizer who has never went out of their colonizing way because their mindset is colonizers, because they're an island of a mainland. That voice has become what Uncle Sam's people hear. That has become the voice of reason into Uncle Sam's ear. And this is the upper class. This is the smarter ones of the society are, basically are listening to British perspective, and colonizers, ex-colonizer, current colonizer, future colonizer, they're listening to the British. The British themselves broke from a form of European Union that was already formed, and it was great. It was, yes, the Northerners have more money and the Southerners have more pussy, more land, more sunshine, more sand. Of course, you can work there and you can play there, but you have to be part of the whole. And everybody eats. Everybody eats. The British are following, for Uncle Sam to follow the British, becoming this idea that no, we don't care about the rest of y'all motherfuckers. We're gonna go our way. You can do that, but then you really go your way, and that would be not the way of colonialists. Do not listen to the British. Having the British give the international news to Uncle Sam is like having your wife give you the news of the neighborhood. It can be done, but Uncle Sam, your wife is... The British are... Their idea is colonialism works best, period. This is the British idea, and a little French idea. Colonialism works best. George Washington's idea, the people of Constitution idea were not, colonialists. Didn't actually broke from the being a property of a colony. Those people understood that, helping colonizers, going to bed with colonizers, you become listening to colonizers, you adapt colonial mindset. You adapt colonial mindset. And that's a bad thing. Colonial mindset that says, I can come over there and bring a better order than the shitty order that you have put together. But then you have a democracy. So George Bush is not here to say, watch see after 20 years he hasn't been able to bring a better order that it had 20 years ago. It's still not there. After 500, 600,000 collateral damage, lives lost. And you think to yourself, it's like, folks, you don't have to do this to each other on your planet. If it has an order, work with it. Work with it. Send them tourists. I mean, if they see all love from Uncle Sam, they don't have to arm themselves. Uncle Sam, if all they see is love from you. They don't have to arm themselves. So if you can send your love with some tourists who you're literally paying to go and see the world, and some of them end up in Iran, what's wrong with that? You want to influence and think, understand what they think, and maybe you spread some individualism and some, talk some sense into them through your people. That's the only way. That's the right way. That's the logical way to be the shining city on the hill. And after those 2 years, here's the thing, Uncle Sam. After those 2 years of you sending your citizens overseas, you will get some excellent citizens back. But you're sending these citizens overseas to study or to have fun, business, whatever they want to do. You're sending them with umbrellas, no guns. The idea is go just live. Comes to some sort of understanding with the local order that is there. Come to some sort of understanding that, hey, if you let us do this, you get all the money that we're giving these people to spend. And if you keep your shit in order, their families will also probably visit once a year as well, to visit their son or daughter. You're going to get that tourist money as well. So it would be an incentive for these shitholes to a little get their act together. And at the beginning, you're going to have some casualties, Uncle Sam. Can't say it's going to be without its casualties, but much less than casualties of war. When you send tourists abroad, some people, it is life. Some people will have accidents. But what is accidents? What is a few martyrs of freedom who basically, it's sort of like seeing, I'm sure, Mormon kids who go out to door. I'm sure they have had bad days. They've been disrespected and they have been, whatever. But it is what it is. You send them out to build them to get back a man. You send out a boy to get back a man. So yeah, some bad accidents might happen, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Insure everybody. If something bad happens, give millions of dollars to the surviving family. But understand that spreading the idea of individual freedom works best if it's taken there with tourists who are spending money and making friends. Not in a bad way, not in a malicious way, in a good way. They get married, they have families over there. Maybe they get married, they bring families over here at your land, Uncle Sam. So the whole thing would work out much better. People get armed, Uncle Sam, when people are scared. Let me repeat again, Uncle Sam. People get armed when people are scared. And Uncle Sam, for one reason or other, the British and the French have found a way to get you into sticky situations in land that the French and the British had previously owned, real estate that they owned. They get you involved, Uncle Sam, and you have a lot of soldiers on the ground. And now Uncle Sam is your representatives are telling the Europeans that, yeah, motherfuckers, your colonies are keeping up. Your colonies are getting expensive. They want to pay up. Well, Uncle Sam, the British and the French, I understand. As you have noticed, the British just recently released 2 aircraft carriers. So the British are always in to put down colonies, enforce their will on the mainlanders. Now these mainlanders could be in mainland Africa or in mainland Asia or in mainland Europe. So getting into bed with the right thing is, Uncle Sam, no, please don't increase your military budgets. None of you should increase your tourism budgets. You literally, you recruit people the ages of between 18 and 20, 2 years out after the primary education of high school. You recruit them for 2 years for your to do their national service, and for those 2 years you send them overseas. Pay them as you would pay whatever you had to pay a soldier to live. Pay them whatever soldier's salary overseas. Let them spend that money overseas. Helps the local economy, and that wins more hearts and minds. Here's the thing, Uncle Sam. After the Iraqi invasion and all of that, after you broke the local order, instead of working with the local order, imagine if you had sent 10,000 tourists to Iraq over a period of 10 years, over a period of 5 years, over a period of 2 years. Imagine how much better the relationship would have been if you kept on sending just young tourists. It would be good for those local orders that have been formed will benefit from connection with Uncle Sam's children, and Uncle Sam's children will benefit for life, benefit from interaction with the people abroad. It's really good. It's win all around. The only guys who are going to lose are going to be Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. These are going to be the only losers. But they don't even have to lose. You can tell them to start, developing space. All these, arms manufacturers should make tourists out of the soldiers. You will never have another war, Uncle Sam, if you can make tourists out of people who are, you could recruit as soldiers. You recruit them as tourists. You will never have to worry about another war. On the other hand, give all these arms manufacturers, tell them that from now on you're interested in space. So Trump had the right idea. Well, this idea has been there for a long time, but nobody actually had brought it up. I guess he was, okay with whatever they're going to say. But yeah, these arms manufacturers should all get into the business of space. And your soldiers or people of soldier age should be turned into tourists, given a meager salary, backpackers' expenses. Because even a backpacker expense goes a long way in cheaper countries. Give a backpacker's expenses to these young kids, and they go over as kids, and you will get back men. Yes, they will have some difficulties, but you will get back men, Uncle Sam. They went as tourists, but they came back as men. I think it works for every side. And please, Uncle Sam, you got to get out of bed. The British are always in good for a fight. They always want to put down some race, some part of the planet, bring order, bring the pink skin order to somewhere in the fucking planet. Listening to pink skin, listening to the British news on NPR is a nutty thing. It's nutty. It's nutty. The British are always have been racist, have always been elitist. That's why they broke from the European Union. Nobody should listen to the British. Nobody. Nobody. Uncle Sam, make yourself the shining city on the hill. Your people, they lack health care, they lack education, they lack housing, they lack education, they lack health care, they lack education. Uncle Sam, the money can be better spent than, trying to bring order, your own expensive pink skin structured order. It's always going to be expensive. And what, you're going to charge the locals to bring your order to the locality? Why not, let the locality bring Why not let the locality bring their own order? If they have their own order, work with them, help them in trade and with tourists, and they will become a little more like you, and you will become a little more like them. But not through colonialism, not through force, not through, naming their cities after yourself, and not through, colonizing them, not through enforcing your will upon them. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine, which still apparently is at force, is on the minds, is at play, it's talked about behind closed doors. Yeah, Monroe Doctrine is basically a colonial doctrine. It's basically saying we have the right to, this is our backyard. Well, even at that, even based on Monroe Doctrine, the result of your actions, Uncle Sam, is that you have created more stability for yourself, but you have created a bad job of, creating some kind of stability in your backyard, that half of your backyard is moving into your front yard. This immigration is basically this immigration is basically Uncle Sam has decided that, okay, I'm in charge of my backyard too. Backyard is mine too, but I'm not really concerned with how it's run, as long as, they don't have any nationalist views. They don't think they're separate from me. So, the people of backyard have been neglected. Now the people of backyard are moving into the front yard of Uncle Sam, both figuratively and literally, to cut the grass. And Uncle Sam is like, no, you're brown. I don't like to give I don't like you to cut my grass. Are you here legal? If you're legal, okay, you can cut my grass. But if you're not legal, you can't cut my grass. And it's sort of like, well, they can't have their own independent nationalist government. If they do, you embargo them, and then you fund little shitheads here, and you fund little shitheads over there to put up a fight against somebody who was who's obviously has got a big penis and trying to bring some kind of order. Here's what I'm saying, Uncle Sam. Even dictators, as long as they have brought some kind of order and there is progress in their people, even a dictator is tolerable. As long as there is order, as long as there is not anarchy, because we want to avoid anarchy. And your tactics, Uncle Sam, recently have created nothing but anarchy. I mean, Afghanistan is more anarchic now than it was before. Iraq was an anarchy, and now it is. It has been for the past 20 years. Keep fucking bombs going off here and there. Syria had anarchy, and suddenly, Iraq got interrupted. Suddenly, Syria got interrupted. I'm trying to say it hasn't helped. I'm trying to say if 5,000, American tourists visit Jordan every year, you will get much better result than having to topple the system and some kind of anarchy forms, and then until some kind of anarchy, because this is how their social evolution has brought them. This is where their social evolution has brought them, and they are at this point that they still need a big penis before they listen to what you have to say. They need to see a big penis first. Then, if your penis is big, I listen to what you have to say. This is where their culture is. What do you want me to do about it? You think sending soldiers and tanks and you're going to bring them freedom to the jungle? Okay, they ate each other. Some of them literally ate each other. You brought freedom to the jungle. Uncle Sam, please get out of bed with the British. The British are always bad news. The British were colonialists, are colonialists, will always think like a colonialist, because the British are an island nation and always in need of resources. They never have enough resources in Britain, because it's an island of 90 million. They have exhausted all of their resources long time ago. They want shit, they have to import. Oh no, I guess shit is the only thing they don't have to import. Everything else they have to import. I wouldn't get into the bed with the British colonialists for all the money in the world. It's just who they are. It's bad for the planet, Uncle Sam. One race, one group of people determining how the hierarchy of power in another part of the planet, telling the Taiwanese that they should not be influenced by the Chinese, is just mad. It's sort of like, of course, it's an island 100-mile off coast of this big piece of area. I'm talking geography here. Big piece of Asia, and you got Taiwan. Of course Taiwan has to, be aligned with the politics of the mainland, because they have to eat. Mainland has their resources. Yes, they bring a little from Southeast Asia, but we're talking about efficiency, right? The most efficient system is to bring your stuff exchange with your closest neighbor. That's the most efficient way. So China and Taiwan are always going to be interdependent, have to be interdependent. So that means their policies should be aligned, the Chinese and the Taiwanese. But how is it that they have, somebody has decided that they should not be aligned? These are the reminiscence of the Chinese dynasties which ruled over China, and while they were in charge, China was very weak. Now a new system has formed, and these guys, since those dynasties supposedly have died off, hopefully nobody's following up, they should be And this new Chinese system has, has worked out okay. It has worked out okay. They have pulled a lot of people out of poverty, and thank you for Uncle Sam for, providing the labor. But please don't be enemies. It's just this whole idea of the party can only go on as long as everybody's friend. We don't, we want an European party that everybody goes to the party and everybody goes home in one piece. We don't want, a rap party. We don't want Uncle Sam to pull out his handgun and start shooting because, he thinks somebody disrespected him. And Uncle Sam lately with these, wild cards of presidents who apparently, since Uncle Sam, if you don't have a minimum bar to enter for a political seat, minimum bar of education, minimum bar of public service, if you don't have a minimum bar of education and management, education first, if you don't have a minimum bar of education for your high political office, once in a while you get George W. Bush, once in a while you get Reagan, once in a while you get Trump. You gotta have a bar of education to enter and all these bad ideas of going over there and changing structures and removing the hierarchy and putting a different hierarchy, choosing the leaders for them, agreeing with the leaders for them, agreeing with their coup leader, and getting into bed with the coup leaders, and all these are all these are unnecessary, Uncle Sam. These are all colonialist ideas. There were a lot of Americans during the 1776, Revolutionary War. There were a lot of Americans who were on the side of the British. They wanted the colony because, I guess their bread was buttered more on that side, and but it just doesn't make sense, Uncle Sam, to be in bed with the British. The British will always be colonialists, have colonialist mind, and their news certainly, which is, published on NPR as a source of international news. The British news has very British, very superior, very elitist, very racist identity. Because it's the British news. This is how a British sees the world. This is not how an Angolan sees the world. What the British say is not how a person from Angola sees the world. This is not how a person from, Algeria sees the world. This is not a person from Peru. This is not a Peruvian perspective. This is a British perspective. And British are not neutral. British are colonizers. Have been colonizers, will be colonizers, always, forever. British shall not be consulted. They're colonizers. There is history, and since we all know history, if a group of people have shown themselves to be very abusive of others, they should be set aside, not dealt with. If you're abusive, you sit aside. The British and the French have been very abusive, beyond their numbers. And Uncle Sam, you're getting into bed with them, and you're becoming abusive in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Colombia, in Panama, in Somalia, Libya, Algeria, and every time you're breaking the local order, and you're promising the locals that freedom will bring them better order, and you think you're dealing with the Swedish, that if you set them free, they're going to be thinking Swedish, have common sense of the Swedish, and have go straight to democracy. No, their social development is still at the stage of who has the biggest penis. You can't help their social development unless you send them tourists. But breaking the social structure, the order that they already had, is just a no-no. It's a nutty idea, and only the British can convince you. These are British ideas. What I'm trying to say, Uncle Sam, these are British ideas. British ideas are usually bad for other people. For the British, it works just fine. 007. As long as he gets what he wants and saves the world, I guess. Yeah, the world has been saved for the British up to now. The British have had good standard of living, have had, they've been the center of the world, and, everybody goes over there, has to kiss the rings. Yes, they've had it well. But again, because Uncle Sam is in bed with them. Uncle Sam, it's not a good idea to be in bed with the British. It's never a good idea to be in bed with an island nation with a colonial mindset, colonial spirit.